John, welcome back. You've been to Eritrea, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So as you have said, I'd like to update you this afternoon on my recent mission to Eritrea, where I spent 3 days last week. Of course, you don't hear very much in the news about the situation in Eritrea because Eritrea has been quite isolated and off of the, if you like, the media radar screen. So I think it is important to update you on the work that we, the United Nations, are doing there, and also the impact of that work. As you probably know, Eritrea has a population of about 3.5 million people. The issues that we focus on there in the development and the humanitarian effort is around food insecurity. Given the geographical location of Eritrea, it does find itself very susceptible to harsh climatic conditions, and not least in the last period around El Nino. There's also, Eritrea sits quite low in the Human Development Index at 179 out of 188 countries on that index, which means that when we talk about our commitment at the United Nations to the Sustainable Development Goals, leaving nobody behind by 2030, and making the biggest efforts for those who are already furthest behind, Eritrea would be a very high priority for us. We focus also on the health sector and health services. We also focus on children, particularly infant mortality, access to clean drinking water, and support around improving sanitation. So for the work that we are doing, I was also reflecting on our progress over the last 5 years as the current plan, the plan that we had with the government from 2013 to 2016 was concluded and reviewed in terms of its impact, and a new program of work has just recently been agreed from 2017 to 2021. So that's a 5-year plan. We have come from a situation back in 2012 where we were in a very difficult relationship with the government. There was quite a situation vis-à-vis their not really believing that there was a value to the continuation of UN programming, and equally we were having big challenges on our side vis-à-vis accessing the people and also the information that we required to do good programming. I'm very pleased to see over the course of the last number of years that those relationships have improved to the positive benefit of the people of Eritrea. So in the end of our program of the last number of years, we were able to see very measurable and positive improvement in the plight of people who were depending on our programming in the areas of our work. And in terms of building a more constructive and positive relationship based around mutual respect with the authorities, local communities and the people themselves, to have an expanded program for the next 5 years, which also embraces the issues around human rights, gender, migration, youth, as very important components of this 5-year program, I think speaks to the progress that we are making, not just in the practical positive impact around humanitarian issues, but also in our ability also to deal with the more controversial and difficult and sensitive issues as well, in agreement with the government. So again, I very much acknowledge the work that is being done there. Now, I don't want to overstate the progress. It's significant because it is on a positive trajectory, but we have a long way to go. And as a country, as I said, 179 out of 188 on that Human Development Index, we need to speed up and accelerate our efforts in terms of supporting the programming that is being done across the board. The state of population is that 80% are dependent on subsistence agriculture. That makes them very susceptible to, as I said, the climatic conditions, and therefore all efforts are made to work on how to improve and enhance the productivity in the agriculture sector. Notwithstanding those efforts, there is still a large gap between what is needed and what is being produced, and this then reflects in the nutritional status of particularly the children. This is a big focus for UN programming, in particular for UNICEF and WHO. I myself visited nutritional feeding centres, health clinics, saw firsthand the good work that's being done. 50% of the children under the age of 5 are suffering from stunting, and 39% of the children are generally underweight. So that does mean that we have to all work very actively in that particular area to make sure that we are addressing those who are suffering from malnourishment, and make sure that they get the treatment on time and effectively. And as I said, there is a very extensive program with UNICEF on that issue. Also, the whole question of access to clean drinking water is something that continues to be a challenge, and again, a lot of work is being done in that area as well. We have a relatively modest, by global standards, appeal for Eritrea. It's $328 million over 5 years, and again, my message to the donor community is, in first instance, a word of thanks, because our previous program has been funded to the degree of 83%. So that's one of the higher funded programs globally. Although it is a relatively small program, it has achieved strong funding support over the last couple of years. So now we are encouraging that donors continue to step up and support this new program going forward, and to reflect on, as I said, the value for money, the impact, the very direct impact that it is having. Finally, I should mention that when reflecting back on progress made, there is a lot to be said in terms of progress around the Millennium Development Goals as we now turn into the Sustainable Development Goals, because Eritrea did achieve a lot of progress on a number of those MDGs, particularly the health-related goals 4, 5, and 6, and in the areas of infant mortality, access to clean drinking water, the whole question of safe births and so forth. So again, I do think that there is definitely a momentum there that is positive and that needs to be built on. But I also want to make clear that there is a long way to go, and that's why we do need to give this country the attention that it deserves, so that it can stay on that trajectory. It's a country that, as I said, has had an isolationist policy and has been isolated over the years because of the very difficult political issues. It's not my job to get involved in those issues, but it is very much my job to navigate through those difficult issues to the people, and to make sure that we, the United Nations, are doing what we should be doing for the people, who in the end have our global commitment through the SDGs not to be left behind, not to be forgotten because of difficult global politics, but rather to find a way, and I do believe that we have found a way to work productively and positively to the positive effect in terms of dealing with humanitarian issues and also working on the development side to make sure that they move up the Human Development Index. So with that said, I will stop and I will be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ging. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, thank you for doing this press conference. I have a number of follow-up questions. First, you talked about climatic conditions. Is Eritrea being affected by drought the way some of its neighbors are? And is this having an impact on the fact that, as you said, 50% of children under 5 are suffering from stunting? And is Eritrea at all considered one of those countries threatened by famine? And could you give us some numbers on 50% of children under 5 suffering from stunting? How many children is that? And in terms of the new plan that you announced until 2021, you said it's going to include human rights. As I'm sure you know and everybody in this room knows, the human rights record in Eritrea has been seriously criticized by human rights organizations and others. What kind of a program is the United Nations going to be doing regarding human rights? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So on the issue of drought, indeed, Eritrea, as with all of the countries of that region, the Horn of Africa, are impacted by the same climatic conditions. Some are in better shape in terms of being able to cope with that. So we have a threat of famine in Somalia, okay? That is compounded by the drought conditions are compounded by, of course, the conflict situation in Somalia. The other countries like Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, they are, of course, suffering from the effects of the climate, the harsh climate, but they're not on the cusp of famine. Right? So they're not in that category. But we have to work very hard together to make sure that their vulnerability and their susceptibility is mitigated. And that's why the programs that we do in support of what the government itself is doing are so very, very important. And again, I think that came across very clearly. When it comes to the actual numbers, I don't want to give you a wrong number, and I don't have the number of children in front of me, so I'll get somebody to come back to you on that. With regard to human rights, the reason that I mentioned it is that it is very significant, because there are, of course, very big and real human rights challenges in Eritrea. The program of work is part of that combined development and humanitarian framework that has been agreed with the government. So they have agreed within that framework that the resident coordinator, who also is the humanitarian coordinator, but in her resident coordinator capacity, that she will have human rights capacity in her office. So I met with her human rights advisor, and that again, as with the gender advisor, the youth advisor, and the migration advisor, that they will be working to achieve the projects that have been outlined in the program of work as well. Now that, of course, is in complement to what the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the other human rights instruments are also doing. So it is one component of the work that is being done And, of course, there are other entities like the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which is entirely dedicated to human rights issues. But I did think it was significant to highlight that there is this human rights component within the development program as well. Thank you.
Masood?
Thank you. Masood Haider from Dawn newspaper of Pakistan. Mr. King, I mean, after ED is such a comprehensive question, it's difficult to ask anything. I just wanted the continued sanctions and that Eritrea is lumped with Somalia on this issue. The continued sanctions, and they must be having their impact. Of course, when you were there, were you able to assess as to what the humanitarian condition exists over there as part of, because of the continued sanctions over there, and whether it's a good thing to de-link it from Somalia?
Well, as you can imagine, this is one of the sensitive political issues vis-à-vis the decision around sanctions. As a humanitarian, we always appeal for those who are imposing restrictions on a country to take care to make sure that those restrictions don't impact on the population and the welfare of the population. My mission, of course, was not to analyse the impact or otherwise of sanctions, but rather to look at the humanitarian situation for people and, what was the trajectory of their human development. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? What are the vulnerabilities? What are the issues that we really need to be focusing on? So I know that the sanction issue is a controversial issue, and it's being dealt with at the highest levels. And all I can say is that we hope that those sensitive political issues will get solved positively to the benefit of the people of Eritrea, without going into passing judgment, because it's not my role, and frankly, I don't have enough knowledge or insight to be able to say what is the direct or indirect consequences, other than that I hope that we can move on from those dynamics that solve those problems that generate these reactions that move things onto a more positive course. As a more general point, as a humanitarian, appealing for the best interests of the good people, but I'm not going to go any further on what is the direct or indirect impact, because that's not my remit. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Intercity Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coast for Access. Thanks a lot for doing these briefings. I had other questions, but it's this sanctions question I want to ask you about, because as you may have seen, the UN country team in Sudan, of which OCHA is a part, issued a statement 2 days ago welcoming in advance the removal of sanctions on Sudan, which, whatever you think of it. So you're saying that it's not your role, and I'm trying to understand, I've been asking for a couple of days, how does the country team, how does it operate? Is it in fact a hard and fast rule of OCHA as it participates in country teams to not issue formal statements on sanctions on a country, or does this indicate that OCHA sees the Sudan sanctions as less meritorious than those on Eritrea? I just want to understand the difference between what you're saying here and what the country team, including OCHA, did as with regard to Sudan. And I've tried to ask them, but they have not answered. So I'm asking you.
Okay. I read that statement. They didn't welcome the lifting of sanctions.
They said, okay, go ahead.
What they said in the statement, as I recall, I wish I had it in front of me now, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, they looked forward to the decision, the upcoming decision. I think that's what the wording says. Right. So they looked forward to the upcoming decision. What their press statement was highlighting, and I think rightly so, because it's important that the information that they communicated in that press statement is out there as part of informing the broader, wider international community about what has been happening since the government order issued around earlier this year on humanitarian access and so forth. So they provided an update through that press release on what progress and challenges what progress has been made, challenges remain since that government order was issued. And, of course, in the last sentence, said that they look forward to the decision on the sanctions. That's it. I didn't see any press statement from them where they're welcoming or making any other judgment call on that.
I guess no, and thanks a lot. I can't find it either. At least the article that I saw quoting it may have been gone. May actually be gone. And so what I wanted to, my question was, it's clear as I remember it, and we can there must be an archive somewhere, that they were saying they anticipated, they seemed sort of jumped the gun. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
No, I saw the press reporting.
Okay.
So and then I looked at the statement.
Okay.
And that's what I saw in the statement.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying that they didn't welcome the press reporting. I think maybe the government might have put out something, but the statement that was made by the country team that I saw had as they looked forward to the decision. Of course, what they have provided into the public domain is something that is relevant to the considerations that will be taken in making all of that. So as I say, I think that there was a distance between the headline on the reporting side and what they actually said.
But and I appreciate the last thing I'll say. I mean, I appreciate you answering it. I guess what I'm wondering is, do you think, given even the direct quotes that I saw seem to be, they were wrong about what would happen on Wednesday in the U.S. Will you acknowledge that? Like, it seems
I think John's answered the question on this.
But do you think, as a matter of course, should these country teams, if you put out a press release that's the whole premise of which is proved wrong, shouldn't you either issue a second press release or answer questions about it, or have your UN spokesperson not refer questions to a mailbox that doesn't answer? I mean, I appreciate you answering, and I'm glad you're here.
No.
It's just a fluke that you're here today.
Okay. I think, any of us in the United Nations that make statements should answer for the statements that we make, frankly speaking. Okay. So the country team made a statement, and they're accountable for the statement that they made. I looked at that statement because, yes, it is in a realm of controversy, right? But I think that we in the United Nations as officials have to navigate controversy for positive effect. So we can't steer away from every controversial question. And at the same time, we can't stray into controversy where with every good intention you end up making a situation worse for the people that you're trying to help. So all the time we are, of course, challenged on the perimeters of these issues, as is the right thing to do. And we try, from what we say publicly, to have a positive impact on the situation that we are responsible to try to positively affect. And then we have to make a judgment call as to whether you do that in a public statement, in a public reaction, or you do it behind the scenes, and so on and so forth. So just because you're asked a question doesn't mean you have to answer it. But if you don't answer it, then there will be consequences for not answering it. Okay? So you have to make a calculation. Equally, just because something is controversial doesn't mean that you should fear not answering something there because it's controversial. And I think that this sanctions issue, in whatever country, wherever there are sanctions, as a fundamental principle, right, as a humanitarian, a United Nations humanitarian official, sanctions are the product of political failure. They are, as with conflict, they can be legitimate, but it means that you have gone into a realm of punitive action because the other actions have not worked, right? We, as humanitarians, always highlight that unintended consequences of these actions must be at the center of the decision-making. So it is the onus is on those imposing the sanctions to prove that they are not having the unintended consequence of hurting the population. And we will not shy away from calling out those who impose sanctions to demonstrate how it is that they are ensuring that their sanctions are not having the unintended consequences. Because we have, through our human history, a litany of examples of where they have had negative impact on populations. And at the same time, it's a legitimate instrument of countries in their arsenal of political action to impose these restrictions as they deem fit, and we have a Security Council that does that regularly and so forth. So it's not for me to challenge or question their right to do that, but it is my responsibility, standing with the people who are most vulnerable, to hold them accountable in whatever way I can to ensure that they are ensuring that they are not having these negative impacts on ordinary people. And so there it will go, and as I say, my country team colleagues in Sudan put out a press release in a context which is controversial, on an issue which is controversial, to ensure that a component of information is out there in the public domain, which then can be drawn on by all involved and whomever else wishes to, so that's their duty as well, was to make sure that they felt that information was out there. And they're accountable for doing that. And I frankly, when I saw the press reporting, like you, I would have thought that, okay, let me have a look at what is actually put out there. And I did, and I read it, and I saw that the bottom sentence was that they looked forward. That was the wording that they used. They looked forward to the decision. Now they looked forward to it. The decision has come out. Now they have to deal with it.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Come more often.
Thank you.